I've explained the 1,000-year reign many times, and I'll try to do the whole thing in under 10 minutes here. There is a ton of information, and most people don't know enough scriptures to follow along. But forget about the word 1,000 for a minute, and I'll explain that word at the end of this. Now, Jesus said some of them standing there wouldn't die until he returned in his kingdom to reward every man according to their works. This didn't happen until after the 1,000-year reign. In Revelation 20, people did not live to be 1,000 years old. Isaiah 27 said that Satan would be destroyed whenever the altar was made chalk stones or burned with fire. That happened in 70 AD. Satan was destroyed. We are not in Satan's little season today. Jesus said what his reign would be. It would be whenever he was destroying Israel, destroying the 12 tribes of Israel and Jerusalem. He told the disciples that whenever he came back and sat on his throne, that they would be given 12 thrones to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. That was his reign. Like Daniel said, judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. They reigned, and then one like the Son of Man came to the Ancient of Days and delivered the kingdom back to him. The 144,000 were the first fruits unto God. I have to talk fast because I don't think I have enough time. They were the first fruits unto God, and they followed the Lamb whithersoever he went. Jesus Christ came and he got 12 apostles. He was the end of Israel. Jacob had 12 sons. They were the beginning of Israel. Jesus Christ had 12 apostles to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. They were the end of Israel. The last were first and the first were last. The last ones to come into the kingdom of earth were the first ones to go up into heaven and rule and reign with Christ. That's why they were seen on Mount Zion with him whenever he returned, and they followed the Lamb whithersoever he went. They were the first resurrection. Under the sixth seal, they were the first ones mentioned of being with Christ. And we know that Satan was thrown into the bottomless pit at the first resurrection because they ruled and reigned with Christ after he was thrown into the bottomless pit. In 66 AD, on the 21st day of Artemisius, they were seeing a magnificent sight that if you weren't there to see it, you wouldn't believe it. It was like a thing of fairy tales. Armies and chariots running on the clouds and shining armor encircling the cities of Israel. Before Jesus Christ could return, the 144,000 had to die. They had to love not their lives unto the death. In 64 AD, the first 4 seals were happening. To be an Israelite, they had to be born in the land of Israel. That made them Israelites. To be part of the 144,000, they had to be Israelites. There were many more Jews saved other than that. But the 144,000 would make up the city in heaven, the kingdom that Jesus Christ had, New Jerusalem. He said that whenever he returned in his kingdom, then God would be in them, and he would walk in them, and they did. They were New Jerusalem. If you read in Revelation, there was a 12-sided city, 12,000 cubits on each side. Each cubit was the size of a man or of the angel, because they were in heaven. As it said, they had come to a heavenly Jerusalem, a mount that cannot be touched, a city of the living God, to the company of innumerable angels. So whenever they made it up into heaven as the first resurrection, they became that kingdom. They became New Jerusalem. They were the 12-sided city with each 12 foundations in the name of an apostle on each one. Because Jesus Christ came and he told the 12, he said, go not in the way of the Gentiles, but go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And they sealed up and saved them. 3,000 were out of the church this day, 4,000, 5,000, half of cities believed, whole cities believed. How many thousands of Jews there were that believed, brethren, and they were zealous of the law. And Paul was the apostle of the Gentiles, but that doesn't mean anything to what we're talking about. In 64 AD, a fire burnt Rome, about 70% of the ground. Nero blamed it on the Christians. These are your seals. The white horse going out to conquer. This is Nero conquering. The red horse taking peace from the earth. The Jews started betraying one another, exactly like Jesus said. He said he didn't come to bring peace, but a sword, and their enemies would be that of their own household. Whenever Nero was hunting the Christians would die. They weren't allowed to harbor Christians or their own family members, and they were like, here's a Christian, here's a Christian. And a lot of people fell away at this time because he was burning them for candlelight in his courtyards, tying fetters to their feet, casting them into the sea, feeding them to dogs. And all they had to do was say, I'm not a Christian, and he wouldn't kill them. So there was a great falling away. And that horse took peace from the earth, and they killed one another and betrayed one another. Took peace from the land of Israel. Since the fire burnt Rome down, it brought poverty, and Rome took from everybody's coffers. He went and taxed everybody to where he almost starved the whole Roman Empire to rebuild Rome to even a greater splendor than it was before the fire. That's why it said a measure of wheat for a penny, a measure of barley for a penny. It was poverty. The fourth seal, Nero was given power over a fourth part of the earth. There was an estimated 600,000 Jews living in the direct land of Israel back then. There were millions of them scattered who would come to Israel or Jerusalem for Pentecost, Passover, Feast of Tabernacles. But in the land of Israel, there's about 600,000 people living there, and they were the first ones to suffer this wrath of Nero, this tribulation, right? And he was given power to kill a fourth part of them, 144,000 out of the 600,000. Like it said, he killed them with beasts and famine, right? Starved them, fed them to dogs, animals. As they were being killed, the 144,000, they were waiting under the altar in Jerusalem, crying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, do you not avenge our blood on them which dwell in the land? He said, yet a little while until their fellow brethren were killed as they were, and he gave them white robes. He said, who are these arrayed in white robes? Where did they come from? It said, these are they which came out of great tribulation and loved not their lives unto the death. Those are the ones that went through tribulation. They waited under the altar because they knew that's where Jesus would return from heaven, from the gate to heaven, with the voice of the archangel, and destroy the man of sin that sat in the temple with the brightness of his coming and the word of his mouth. So that was Satan sending the flood after the people. Revelation chapter 12. Satan was cast down. Jesus, whenever he was on earth, he said, now has come salvation. Sorry. He said, now was the judgment of that world. Now would the prince of that world be cast out, and of judgment, because the prince of the world was judged. Talking about Satan. Hebrews said Jesus Christ appeared once at the end of the world to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself, and to anyone that looked for him, he would appear a second time without sin unto salvation. Jesus told the daughters of Jerusalem whenever he was going and carrying his cross, he said, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children, for the days are coming whenever you will cry for the mountains to fall on you and the hills to cover you. That happened under the wrath of the Lamb. Under the sixth seal, it happened to them and their children. Under the wrath of the Lamb, they cried for the mountains and rocks to fall on them and hide them from the face of him that sat on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. So in 64 AD, Satan was still ruling the kingdoms, and he sent a flood after the children out of his mouth, and he chased them into the wilderness. Whenever Jesus was on earth, he said whenever they saw the armies come to Judea, that they were to flee Judea. Whenever they came to Jerusalem, they were to flee Judea, because there would be great wrath upon that people, the Jews. They would fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations. Jesus and Satan could not rule at the same time. Satan was ruling, he cast that flood out of his mouth, but then the earth opened up the flood and swallowed up the flood that Satan cast out of his mouth. That was Satan going into the bottomless pit at the same time that the believers fled into the wilderness, at the same time the first resurrection happened. Jesus Christ returned, the first resurrection happened, the believers fled into the wilderness, Satan was cast into the bottomless pit. And then Jesus got power over Rome, and he ruled with a rod of iron, the Iron Kingdom. He said that whenever the Gentile armies came to Jerusalem, that there would be great wrath upon the Jews. That was the wrath of the Lamb. Whenever the believers fled, whenever the first resurrection happened, whenever Jesus appeared on the clouds, whenever Satan was thrown into the bottomless pit, then the two witnesses came. The two witnesses preached for 1,260 days, the same time frame that the believers were out in the wilderness. And then after the two witnesses finished their work, Satan was let back up out of his prison, the beast that ascended up out of the bottomless pit, and he overcame them, killed them. They were dead for 3 days. They stood up on their feet, and they were caught up into heaven. That's whenever the rapture in the wilderness happened. And that was the end of the reign of Christ. So in 66 AD, Satan was thrown into the bottomless pit while Jesus was reigning. But Satan was the eighth head on the beast. There were 7 heads on the beast. Your 6 Herods, and then John of Scala, the Jewish zealot that took over the temple. When Revelation was written, 5 of them had already fallen. 1 was ruling them, or the crowns on the heads. 1 was ruling then, and the next one would rule for a short time. The other 5 Herods had died. Agrippa II was ruling, and then John of Scala would rule for a short time. But Satan was of the 7. He was the 8th head on the beast, and he went into perdition. He went into perdition, then he gave his power to the beast. That's why it said that the man of sin came after the working of Satan, and he was the son of perdition. He was the son of perdition because Satan gave his power to the beast, his seat to the beast, and great authority to the beast. Whenever Satan knew that he was going into the bottomless pit at the end of chapter 12 there, he gave his power and authority to the beast because he was going to be gone. That's why Satan had 7 heads and 10 horns, but then the beast had 7 heads and 10 horns, and they were given power to continue for 42 months while the Gentiles trampled the city for 42 months. And the beast, Israel, was given power to continue blaspheming his name and his tabernacle because they took over the temple. But after Jesus finished his work, Satan was let back up out of the bottomless pit, overcame the 2 witnesses. Then the rapture happened, and Satan, the beast, and the false prophet gathered all the armies together to Jerusalem. I don't have that much time left in this video. I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you about 1,000. I have a lot more to say on this. I need to make a longer video, which I have plenty of longer videos if you want to go see them. What they found was a Greek translation of Revelation. They never found the original Hebrew that it would have been written in because John and Peter were ignorant and unlearned men, and they wrote in Hebrew. We know that because they could read and quote the law in the scriptures. The word 1,000 in Hebrew was the word Aleph. Their letters were numbers. Whenever the Greeks translated, they translated Aleph to mean 1,000, but it actually meant tribes. Just like whenever Jesus told them they would sit down on thrones with him and judge the 12 Aleph of Israel, they judged the 12 tribes of Israel. And that's what 1,000 should have been translated to, as the time of the judgment of the tribes. I guess I have a lot more to say, but I guess I can't. So give me a follow. Come check out my other videos. Check out my YouTube where I explain the 1,000-year reign more in depth and slower. The problem I have making videos like this, I always feel depressed, like I don't even want to make them. Because people have no idea the scriptures, that everything I just said there were scriptures. They don't even know. They don't know the Bible well enough to even understand what I'm saying. So I just try to tell people simple things to get them to go to God. I realized I didn't make this part that clear. Satan's little season was whenever he's let back up out of the bottomless pit to gather the armies to Jerusalem, which happened in 70 AD for that final siege, Armageddon, Gog and Magog. He gathered all the Jews from all over the world, and the Romans destroyed the temple, and the wrath of God came on them.